destroy this plague, and all those who would spread it. You have your orders.
Hey everyone, CoolKid here. With the release of Warframe 1999, we were given a new boss fight in the H-09 Effervon tank. This fight pits players against a Skuldra-controlled tank in the first phase, which becomes overtaken by the Techrot in the second phase. In addition to the standard boss fight, DE also released a secret Superboss variation, which makes the battle much harder. This souped-up variation, known as the H-09 Apex tank, is uniquely frustrating for many players, as its attacks can be extremely hard to handle if you don't know how they work. So, in today's video, we're going to talk about the tank's attacks, strategies for turning it to scrap, and what you get for shutting it down. Do note that I'm going to talk about the regular Effervon tank first, just to give myself a baseline to work with, and then we'll discuss the Apex tank in depth. This video is also going to be primarily from the perspective of a solo player, as the accolade glyphs require solo play. Alright, without further ado, let's rock. The H-09 Effervon tank is found at Victory Plaza in Hulvania, and similar to the fragmented bosses, it has a unique lead-up section that must be completed before squaring off with the tank itself. While navigating towards the boss room, players will find themselves blocked by a Therisite barricade. Now, I know what you're thinking, why don't we just jump over it? Great idea, but that's not how this gets to work. Instead, we'll have to kill nearby Skuldra troops until one of them drops an emergency transponder. We can then pick up this transponder, which marks a nearby terminal that it needs to be uploaded to. Once this upload is complete, a Stormfall squadron will be called in, and one of the enemies in this squadron will be marked with a red icon. Killing the marked enemy will drop a Thermian RPG, which can be used to damage the barricade until it eventually breaks. Be careful about the gaps between the plates though, as rockets can slip between them. Do note that the number of RPG carriers and the number of rockets required to break the barricade both scale with player count, so this will take longer if your teammates aren't paying attention. Which, let's be real, they probably aren't. It's also important to note that extra RPGs and transponders are despawned once a barricade breaks, so you can't carry them into future barricade phases or the boss fight itself. This barricade sequence must be done twice before the tank can be fought, with the first barricade taking 3 hits to break and the second taking 5, when solo at least. Because of this health difference, the first barricade only needs 1 RPG, while the second needs 2, so you'll have to do the whole transponder song and dance twice the second time around. Pro tip: if you shoot the balloon that a Stormfall trooper is dropping in on, they'll take a huge amount of damage on contact with the ground. The higher the trooper was when the balloon was broken, the more bones they break when they come to a sudden stop. This lets you kill RPG carriers pretty much instantly if you shoot the balloon as soon as they spawn, which is nice. Once the second barricade has been destroyed, we can proceed into the boss arena. Before we do that though, I want to point out that remaining Skuldra units can be used to activate conditional effects before the boss fight. This is a great time to proc things like weapon arcanes, galvanized mods, and things of that sort before fighting the tank itself. Once we've got all of our ducks in a row, we can enter the arena and begin the fight.
H-09, destroy this plague, and all those who would spread it. You have your orders.
The first thing you'll notice about the tank is that it staggers you when it enters the room, even if you're status immune, which is really weird. The second thing you'll probably notice is that the tank is invincible, and its health bar is segmented into 2 chunks. Along the tank's chassis, 8 weak points can be found, with 2 on the sides of each tread and 4 along the tops of the treads. 6 of these 8 weak points must be broken to make the boss's health bar vulnerable, and this has to be done twice to push the boss into its second phase. It's important to note that these weak points up your crit tier on hit, and they count as headshots for things like Argon Scope, Acuity mods, and Incarnate Charge. Weirdly enough, while the tank is status immune during its invincibility periods, it actually can be armor stripped by Shattering Impact and the Latron Incarnate's Flensing Spikes perk. This not only makes the tank more vulnerable to damage when all weak points are broken, but the weak points themselves take considerably more damage if the tank is armor stripped. As such, it can be a good idea to remove the tank's armor right away to make the weak points easier to destroy. Moving on to the tank's attacks, it gets progressively more dangerous as its weak points are destroyed. As such, we're going to start with all 6 weak points being intact, and then we'll introduce new abilities as the weak points are broken. The most basic attack the tank has hoses players with shots from its machine gun, which rapidly deal puncture damage. This attack isn't super threatening by itself, and it's easy to avoid if you stay moving, but its constant chip damage can prevent shield regeneration, which is worth keeping in mind. The tank's second basic attack is Tank Shot, which starts with the main gun winding up, collecting energy and drawing a laser to telegraph the shot's trajectory. Once the windup is complete, the tank will fire the shot, which deals high gas damage and knocks down on hit. This shot will also leave a puddle of Effervon wherever it lands, which rapidly deals gas damage if stood in. On the topic of knockdowns, the parked vehicles in the boss arena can be blown up unexpectedly by the tank, and they will stagger players who are near them. As strange as this might sound, it can be genuinely helpful to destroy the vehicles in advance to prevent this from happening, as it's super annoying. The last of the tank's basic attacks are simple melee swipes. If the player is too close, the tank will swing its cannon to knock them away, dealing impact damage and knocking down. The tank can also run the player over if they're on the ground level, which is honestly really funny. Once 3 weak points have been destroyed, the boss gains access to a new attack, Harbingers. The boss deploys 3 Harbinger balloons, which take up spots around the arena and spew Effervon slime onto the floor. Like Tank Shot, this slime rapidly deals gas damage if stood in, but this time it covers a lot more area. These balloons can be destroyed to stop them from turning the floor green, but they're quite tanky. In addition to being status immune, they don't increase crit tier when the balloon is shot, unlike regular Harbingers, so they can be a pain to break. The boss can have up to 6 Harbingers active at a time, and they can quickly coat the entire arena in slime, so I recommend popping the balloons as soon as they spawn. Once 5 weak points have been destroyed, the boss gains access to another new attack, Effervon Flood. During this attack, the boss will fire a torrent of liquid Effervon, sweeping its cannon in a roughly 90-degree arc. This spawns slime that coats the floor in the same way the Harbingers do, making a huge amount of the arena pretty much untouchable. This is a bit tricky, but personally, I recommend keeping track of how many weak points you've destroyed, and once you're down to the last one, try to bait the tank into wasting its Effervon Flood on a small portion of the map. To explain what I mean, let's look at this top-down. Here's the arena, here's the tank, and here's the player that the tank is targeting. I know this is low quality, but I don't have the budget for anything better, sorry. So, if the tank has moved towards the edge of the arena and it floods away from the wall, it will cover a huge amount of the floor. In contrast, if the player moves between the tank and the wall, then the flood will cover a much smaller area, making it considerably less impactful. Once the final weak point has been broken, the boss's main health bar will become vulnerable. This allows the player to attack the boss directly, but with some considerations. For one, the boss has status reduction, meaning that any individual status effect has a cap of 4. Funnily enough, the tank can have its armor reduced in this phase by corrosive and heat procs, but because of the status reduction, it isn't really that efficient. It can be inflicted with viral procs though, making it take much more damage. Issue is, the tank also has 85% damage reduction, so most attacks aren't really going to do much. Enter Stormfall, who drop in to assist the boss. These are an assortment of Scaldra enemies, but 2 of them will be marked with a red icon. Marked enemies will drop a Thermian RPG on death, and these RPGs deal much more damage to the boss than conventional weaponry. It normally takes several RPG shots to deplete the boss's health, but if the boss has been armor stripped and/or primed with viral, it can easily be destroyed with 1 shot. This makes the phase extremely quick, especially if the RPG carriers were killed by gravity. The Scaldra reinforcements also offer an opportunity to generate orbs, pick up ammo, and activate on-kill conditional effects. I do want to note that Stormfall drops will happen periodically as long as the boss is vulnerable, and if you run out of RPGs, new RPG carriers will also spawn in. This can be beneficial in terms of orb generation and the like, but the reinforcements can stack up quickly. This is especially bad because certain Scaldra units can actually heal the tank. In particular, the Scaldra Eradicator can deploy Chem Spires that heal all nearby Scaldra units, including the boss. They can also throw Effervon grenades with the same effect, which can be difficult to counter. If you can, destroy any Chem Spires that you see, and take out the Eradicators as quickly as possible. Or, just skip the phase outright with an RPG quick draw. In addition to the Scaldra foot soldiers, the tank itself gains a few new properties. For one, Tank Shot charges much faster, going from a 3-second windup to a 1-second windup. Harbingers also spawn in groups of 2 now, but the cooldown for spawning them in is much lower than before, so they stack up faster. On top of that, the boss gains access to a new attack, Effervon mortars. Periodically, the ground will be marked with a line of orange rings, and after a delay, these rings will explode into puddles of Effervon slime. Between the more frequent tank shot, plentiful harbingers, Effervon flood, and Effervon mortars, the floor of the arena is very unsafe during this phase. This creates some issues considering that the RPG needed to damage the boss is, you know, on the ground. Fortunately, you can ease that pain a bit by rolling as you pick the RPG up, which is slightly faster than collecting it normally and grants you damage reduction. This portion of the fight can be very overwhelming, and as such, my main recommendation is to destroy the boss's health bar as fast as possible. Sure, you can juggle destroying the harbingers, baiting the Effervon flood whenever it's off cooldown, and farming the Skuldra troops as they spawn, but it's much easier to just blitz through this part. As soon as the boss is vulnerable, shoot down an RPG carrier and send a rocket straight into the tank. This gets you through the phase before all of the attacks stack up, making it much more manageable. Once the first health bar has been destroyed, the boss will regain its 8 weak points, and the fight will essentially start from the top. Do note, because the boss has all 8 weak points, its moveset is going to be extremely limited. As such, this is a great time to destroy any remaining harbingers and clean up the residual Skuldra. Beyond that, this health bar is the same as the first, with the only exception I've noticed being the Harbinger attack, which now spawns 5 balloons at a time instead of 3. Once you destroy all the weak points and deplete the boss's second health bar, the tank will enter a stun state. Approaching the tank while it's in this state produces a prompt to perform a mercy finisher, and performing this finisher causes a cutscene to play and Phase 2 to begin. Phase 2 completely alters the boss fight, changing up all of the attacks, making the arena significantly more claustrophobic, and changing the tank's faction from Skuldra to Techrot. The boss now has 3 health bars that need to be chewed through, and similar to the first phase, its body has 85% damage reduction. The boss is entirely status immune in this phase, but like the first phase, it can be armor stripped. To offset this, well, tankiness, the boss spawns several Techrot proboscis weak points across its chassis. These weak points deal 5% of the boss's maximum health as damage when destroyed, and they appear every 5 or 10 seconds. Interestingly enough, these proboscis weak points can charge Incarnans, but they don't trigger headshot-based effects like Argon Scope, and they also don't take bonus damage if Acuity mods are being used. While precision weapons still work in this phase, the more erratic spawn points of the proboscides makes them much more annoying to use. AoE weapons, energy wave projectiles, and slam attacks all do a great job of countering this, as they can hit multiple weak points at the same time without requiring much aiming. Moving on to the boss's attacks, it gains new abilities as its health decreases like the first phase. So, like before, we're gonna start with the basic attacks and introduce new ones as they become available to the boss. First up, the tank has access to Hot Shot, which is almost identical to Tank Shot, except it deals viral damage instead of gas. It does lack the telegraphing laser, but you can still see it conjuring up energy during its windup, and it no longer leaves a pool of slime on the ground either. This ability is avoided in a manner similar to Tank Shot. Just stay mobile and you should be alright. You might have noticed that the tank sprouted several tendrils in this phase, which... God, I hope there's no art of that. Anyways, the boss uses these tendrils for several attacks, the simplest of which is Mosh Pit. During this attack, the boss will rear up a tendril, which glows during its windup. It will then slam the glowing tendril into the ground, releasing a shockwave that knocks down players it hits. This is repeated anywhere from 2 to 5 times before the attack ends, but staying airborne makes it a non-issue. The boss is almost entirely stationary during this attack, so it's a good opportunity to deal some damage. The tendrils are also used for our next attack, Bottle Off. For this attack, the boss flings a tendril out to one side, launching a swarm of infested bees across the ground and through the air. This attack can be pretty easily avoided by jumping over it, or rotating around the tank, but it comes out very fast, so it's easy to get hit if you aren't ready for it. The tank's final basic attack is Pyrotechnics, which starts with several orange rings appearing on the floor. After a brief delay, these rings will explode in quick succession, launching large plumes of fire into the air. This attack can be avoided by watching for the marked zones and avoiding them until they detonate, similar to Vor's lightning attack if you've seen that video. After its first health bar has been drained, the boss will activate a new ability, Benefit Gig. During this intermission of sorts, the boss becomes invulnerable and lets out a shriek, summoning Techrot Matmas and Obsolite enemies to aid it. The Matmas that spawn in only exist to attack the player, but the Obsolites will rush to the boss and begin healing it. Obsolites that are actively healing the boss will have a brown tether connecting the two, and this healing is not instant, so it can be prevented altogether if you kill the Obsolites quickly enough. Your main priority should be killing the Obsolites as soon as you see them, but the Matmas can be a sizable threat if ignored, so keep them in mind. This phase ends by itself after 20 or 30 seconds, so no input is actually required on the player's part, but it's best to not let the boss heal so the fight doesn't drag out. In a weird way, Benefit Gig is actually, well, really beneficial, as it's a great time to activate on-kill conditional buffs. Build up your Galvanize stacks, stack melee combo, generate orbs and ammo, and get ready for the second health bar. After the first Benefit Gig has concluded, the boss gains access to a new attack, Crowd Surf. This attack starts with the tank rearing itself up and raising its tentacles, before grabbing the wall in front of itself and rapidly slamming into it. If a player is hit by the tank during this attack, they'll take high damage and be knocked down, as you'd probably expect. That's not all though, as a swarm of miasmites will spawn from the wall after impact, which rush down nearby players. These miasmites proc heat when they detonate, which can be very dangerous, but they can also be surprisingly beneficial. Miasmites are great food for on-kill conditional buffs, and on top of that, they're extremely easy to kill in operator form if you need to self-revive using Last Gasp. If you're struggling with the miasmite swarms, crowd control effects are great for making them more manageable, and AoE weapons can take them out in one shot if they group up. Once we've burned through the boss's second health bar, another Benefit Gig will begin, which is identical to the first. After this second intermission has ended, the boss will gain its final attack, Mucus Spires. This attack spawns two, well, Mucus Spires, which are large tendrils that slowly spread the airport jungle juice across the floor. The juice rapidly deals gas damage, and if left unchecked, the Mucus Spires can spread it across the entire floor. These spires are pretty tanky, and similar to the Harbingers from the first phase, they're entirely status immune. They can still be critically hit, so that's another point in favor of crit weapons, as if they needed any more points in these boss fights. Mucus Spires should be focused on once they spawn, as they can be very dangerous if they get wide coverage. Keep your distance and blitz them down to remain safe, or leave them alone if you're confident you can thug that shit out. After depleting the tank's final health bar, there won't be another Benefit Gig. Instead, the tank will die and drop a random Hex Arcane, which you can't pick up for like 10 seconds because the tank is blocking it. On the Steel Path, the tank will also drop one whole Steel Essence to reward you for your effort. After a brief jaunt through the underground, we can reach the extraction tile and ride off with our somewhat mediocre loot. Now that we're through the standard version of the boss fight, it's time to talk about the changes made in the Apex variant. Before we get into the specifics of that though, I need to explain some overarching mechanics that apply to all super bosses. If you're already familiar with these mechanics, then feel free to jump ahead. Still here? Alright, let's get into it. So, the first major thing to note is that the Apex tank is subject to Archon modifiers, which means a few things. For one, self-reviving is completely disabled, and dead players can only be brought back if Nidri is used. On top of that, Last Gasp's drain starts 2 seconds earlier with each use, and the bleed out timer is reduced every time a player goes down, to a minimum of 5 seconds. Spectres, on-call crew, and air support charges cannot be used during the tank fight, but they can be used before the fight starts, and the summons will follow you into the fight itself. The level of the boss and its minions also scales with player count, starting at 225 if solo, and increasing by 25 for every additional player, up to a maximum of level 300 at 4 players. Beyond the Archon modifiers, the tank has access to a Superboss Classic, the Enhanced Magnetic proc. The Slime in the first phase and the Jungle Juice in the second phase both inflict a 3-second magnetic proc. This proc does the typical magnetic stuff, drains 20 energy per second, scrambles the HUD, and disables natural shield regeneration. This magnetic proc also has an additional effect, however. total ability nullification. If the player comes into contact with the slime or the juice, then all abilities will be dispelled, and no new abilities can be cast for 3 seconds. This includes transference, preventing operator use, and you can even be hit with this nullification while in operator form, which prevents transference back to the Warframe until it expires. Do note that sources of status immunity, like Arcane Nullifier, can block the magnetic proc itself. This prevents the energy drain, HUD scramble, and shield recharge penalty, but the ability nullification will still go through. During the tank's second phase, it gains access to another Superboss classic, Cascading Fragmentation. If enough time has passed and the tank still hasn't been defeated, the player will be slapped with the Cascading Fragmentation debuff, which periodically deals damage. This debuff gains a new stack every 60 seconds, causing it to deal even more damage per tick, and it lasts until either the boss or the player is killed. This places a lot of stress on the player, forcing them to end the fight quickly lest they be consumed by this mechanic. I didn't really know where else to mention this, but I also want to point out that, unlike every other Superboss, both phases of the tank can still be armor stripped in the Apex variant of the fight. This makes tools like Latron and Vastalock extremely useful in this fight, as the tank takes much more damage without its armor. Now that we're through the overarching stuff, let's talk about how to unlock the Apex tank. During the Therasite Barricade segments prior to the boss, the player can locate unmarked terminals that also accept an emergency transponder. These terminals have a distinct appearance, with 2 red, cherries above it? Does this computer have a nutsack? Anyways, this secret terminal always spawns in the same tile as the Stormfall terminal, so it's typically close by. At the same time, it is almost always in some kind of nook or cranny, and some tiles have several decoy terminals that can't be hacked. Remember, if it has the blue flower, then it's not the correct terminal, and if it has the red nutsack, then it is the correct terminal. I'm not going to show every single location that these can spawn in, as that would be a huge pain in the ass, so just keep in mind that they're typically tucked away and always spawn in the same tile as the real terminal. If a transponder is brought to this terminal and uploaded, then the snake hacking minigame will begin, using one of several harder layouts. These terminals can't be auto-hacked with ciphers and the like, so you're gonna have to lock in. Don't worry if you get interrupted for any reason, as the transponder only needs to be uploaded once to activate the terminal. Once you complete the snake minigame, a red Scaldra icon will appear below the Therasite Barricade's health, and Arthur will make a comment about Scaldra upping their security. Do note that this secret terminal has to be hacked before the barricade is destroyed, so try not to autopilot picking up the RPG and blasting it away. Once you arrive at the second Therasite Barricade, pick up a transponder and locate a second secret terminal. Hacking this terminal will cause a second Scaldra logo to appear beneath the barricade's health bar, along with another voice line from Arthur confirming that the Apex tank has been activated. From here, build up your conditional stacks, stock up on health and energy, kick the door in, and step through the threshold to enter the boss fight.
H-09, destroy this plague, and all those who would spread it. You have your order.
The first thing you'll notice in this version of the fight is that everything is much faster. The tank moves faster, fires its machine gun faster, charges tank shot faster, and even the projectile of tank shot itself moves faster. In addition, the tracking of tank shot is vastly improved, and it deals enough damage to insta-kill most frames if they don't have their shield gate ready. On top of that, tank shot's Effervon puddle now inflicts an enhanced magnetic proc on contact, so being hit by this attack sucks for a lot of reasons. Staying mobile is extremely important in this version of the fight, as tank shot can easily snowball one hit into a trip back to the orbiter. Once the tank gets down to 3 weak points, it spawns Effervon Harbingers, which have 2 significant changes. For one, the slime they spawn nullifies on contact, so they are much more dangerous if left unchecked. For 2, they are much tankier in this version of the fight, so killing them can be quite difficult. I don't know if they have some kind of damage reduction or what, but weirdly enough, it seems that operator attacks are much more efficient than regular weapon attacks. I don't know if this is just placebo or not, but my amp shreds them quite quickly, so I'll show the build for it on screen now if you're struggling to deal with the balloons. Once the boss has lost 5 weak points, it gains access to a Effervon Flood, which spawns a ton of nullifying slime. I strongly recommend counting the number of weak points you've broken so that you can bait this attack into a smaller part of the arena. Bad management of Effervon Flood can cause the bulk of the boss room to be untouchable, which really sucks. If this does end up happening, wall hopping around the edges of the arena is a great way to stall out the slime, but be aware that the tank is going to try to swat you down. Once all 6 weak points have been broken, the tank will become vulnerable, along with its Skuldra hit squad and Effervon mortar attack. The Effervon mortar spawns slime and nullifies now, as you'd probably expect, not much new there. The Stormfall reinforcements have one major change though. They are now all Eximus units. Keep in mind that these Eximus units obey Holvania's seasonal slants, so they'll be mostly Arctic Eximus in the winter, Jade Light in the spring, Blitz in the summer, and Energy Leech in the autumn. As Eximus units, these guys are super tanky, and juggling their high time to kill with the tank's deluge of nullifying slime is a huge pain in the ass. On the bright side, Eximus units always drop 2 health orbs, an energy orb, and either a primary or secondary ammo box, so they're basically resource pinatas waiting to be popped. My main point of advice for this phase is this: torch the tank's health bar as fast as possible. Because the RPGs are dropped on the very same ground that is often slimed, it can be very difficult to grab an RPG without getting nullified. Shooting the balloons of RPG carriers as soon as they spawn is a fantastic strategy here, as it kills even Eximus units instantly upon hitting the ground. This can be used to get an RPG with ease, and if you armor strip and viral prime the boss, then a single rocket can take out its health bar. Once the boss has lost its first health bar, it will lose access to all of its additional attacks, reverting to only its machine gun, melee swipes, and tank shot. This is a fantastic time to clear out any Harbingers and Stormfall units that are still present, as the boss will be much less threatening. You'll still want to keep an eye on the boss, or at least keep a mental timer of its tank shot so they don't hit you, but otherwise, this is a great opportunity to do some cleaning. Also, as a pro tip, I highly recommend leaving your first RPG in a spot that you'll remember. This lets you collect it as soon as the second vulnerability phase starts, skipping the need to wait for Stormfall. Implying that you one-shot the boss's first health bar, the RPG should still have 2 rockets left, meaning that the second vulnerability phase can be all but skipped. As soon as the boss can take damage, inflict a few viral procs, pick up the RPG, and blast it. This will kill it before Stormfall squads even reach the ground, making the boss's most dangerous phase virtually non-existent the second time around. Once you've got it on the ropes, perform the finisher to activate the transition to Phase 2. Phase 2 of the Apex tank has a lot of changes, even more so than the first phase. One thing they do share, however, is that the boss's movement and attack speed are massively increased. This makes the slams from Mosh Pit come out in much faster succession, and on top of that, Mosh Pit and Bottle Off can now be used at the same time. Speaking of Bottle Off, its projectiles now inflict the viral status, making the move much more dangerous. Hot Shot also charges and travels faster, as you'd expect. Pyrotechnics gets one of the most heinous changes, as it now spawns explosions both vertically and horizontally, and each explosion zone can detonate multiple times. This attack also spawns heat-seeking missiles that detonate into Pyrotechnics explosions on hit. These missiles are borderline invisible, and avoiding them is really hard. Honestly, camping in Void Mode as your operator is a great way to avoid this attack, as it's less of a telegraphed move and more of an epilepsy trigger. I said that Pyrotechnics got one of the most heinous changes in this phase, and that's because the most heinous change easily goes to Crowd Surf. For one, this attack is now accessible in the boss's first health bar after about half of it has been depleted. For two, the animation is much faster, so it's considerably harder to dodge. For three, the miasmites it spawns are now on crack, and they rush the player at insane speeds. Not only that, but detonating miasmites now stagger on top of their high damage heat proc, meaning they can chain stun the player to death. Honestly, most of my deaths in this phase are from the miasmites, so having a game plan to deal with them is extremely important. Crowd control abilities are a great way to do this, as are CC status effects like Radiation and Cold. Radiation will make the miasmites attack and kill each other, which means that they aren't your problem anymore. Cold can freeze the miasmites to make them easier to manage, with melee Kareen making this especially easy. AoE and slam weapons are able to take out miasmites very easily, especially if you bullet jump straight up and let them gather under you. Running away isn't going to work with how fast these little shits are, so have a plan in mind and take them out as fast as you can. Once the boss loses its first health bar, it will activate Benefit Gig, which only has one change. The Matmas enemies will spawn as Eximus units, but the Obsoletes remain normal. The higher enemy level makes both enemy types harder to kill in this section, but the Obsoletes are still squishy enough that they shouldn't be a huge struggle. The main issue here is that the Matmas enemies are a lot more dangerous, so they take up a lot more of the player's attention. Venomous Eximus are especially deadly, as they can insta-kill many frames on contact at this level. It's still important to stop the Obsoletes from healing the boss in this phase, but if an Eximus is threatening you, focus on getting rid of it. It sucks if the tank heals itself, but being dead sucks a lot more, so if you ask me, self-preservation should be top priority. After the first benefit gig has completed, the boss gains access to Mucus Spires. On top of that, the airport jungle juice now nullifies on contact, so the spires are much more dangerous. Like the Harbingers, Mucus Spires are very tanky in this version of the fight, but operator damage burns them down pretty quickly. After the second benefit gig, the Apex tank gains the ability to spawn 3 of these towers, making them coat the floor even faster. Earlier in this video, I suggested destroying the Mucus Spires as quickly as possible, and that is 10 times more important in the Apex fight. If these things cover the entire floor, then you're pretty much screwed, as they leave very few safe areas to stand, and there's nowhere to wall hop like in the first phase. Standing near the edges of this arena in general is a massive risk, because it's full of weird geometry that Warframes stick to like a glue trap. Simply put, if the Mucus Spires spawn, get rid of them immediately. Don't completely ignore the boss, but unless you're confident that you can end the fight before the jungle juice overtakes the floor, focus on knocking down the spires. The Apex tank is a boss that requires a ton of multitasking. Keeping track of the slime on the floor, the Eximus units that spawn in droves, and the boss's multitude of attacks. It's very easy to get overwhelmed in this fight, so do your best to keep your head on. For Phase 1, stay mobile to dodge tank shot, bait out a Effervon flood as soon as the boss can use it, and blitz through the vulnerability sections as fast as possible. For Phase 2, deal with miasmites as quickly as you can, burst down Mucus Spires before they can make the whole arena unsafe, and try not to let Pyrotechnic's visuals send you to the emergency room. Now that we're through the boss's attacks, I want to talk about ways to approach the fight, starting with weapon recommendations. My biggest tip is to bring either a Vastalok with Shattering Impact or a Latron with Flensing Spikes, as they both make the fight much easier. I am honestly kinda surprised that we're able to armor strip this boss, as no other super bosses let you do so, but I strongly encourage you to exploit this weakness. Because both phases can be armor stripped, this applies to both the Skuldra and Techrot versions of the tank. In addition, both phases spawn a lot of minions, which can be leveraged for on-kill conditionals, and you can also activate conditionals before entering the boss room itself. While many super bosses discourage the use of on-kill effects, they can be utilized quite easily in this boss fight, so long as you're able to reach ad spawning sections before your buffs expire. Do keep in mind that almost all enemy spawns will be Eximus units, so they can be quite tough to kill. Also, it's important to keep in mind that the first phase of the tank is only vulnerable to status effects while its weak points are down, and the second phase is completely status immune. As such, weapons built for boss damage should be primarily crit focused, though status weapons can still help with killing minions. Looking at Phase 1 specifically, the tank is of the Skuldra faction, meaning that it takes bonus damage from corrosive and impact, but reduced damage from gas. Corrosive can be used to reduce the tank's armor during vulnerability phases, but because it's status immune for the majority of the fight, and it can be armor stripped at all times through other means, I don't think it's that useful. Personally, I find Viral to be excellent purely for the priming during vulnerability phases, though this doesn't have to be on the main damage weapon. If you want, you can use a weapon with Corrosive to maximize your boss damage, along with a priming weapon for inflicting Viral. When it comes to popping weak points, precision weapons are excellent for this phase, as are Acuity mods and Incarnins. Incarnins are exceptionally good in general, as they can charge off of weak point hits in both phases, so they have virtually infinite ammo. If a weapon deals high headshot damage, it can often pop the weak spots in 1 or 2 shots, which makes the first phase much faster. Speed is the name of the game for Phase 1, so having tools to break weak spots quickly is hugely important. For this role, I recommend weapons like Sybaris, Sikaris, Burst On, stuff like that. Honestly though, my top recommendation goes to Latron, as it can easily one-tap weak spots while also armor stripping with flensing spikes, making it a very strong dual-purpose weapon. For Phase 2, the boss switches faction to Techrot, meaning that it's vulnerable to gas and magnetic, and resistant to cold. The approach to Phase 2 is pretty different from Phase 1, so it can be a good idea to mod a weapon specifically around each phase, matching its damage types to the boss's weaknesses in its respective phase. In terms of damage, AoE and energy wave weapons are king here. Lex Prime is a fantastic option for this phase, as it can shoot through the entire tank and hit several weak spots at once. Slam weapons are also super useful, with options like the Sampites, Coda Meyer, and Sancti Magistar making damage a breeze. If you just keep slamming the boss over and over, you can clear its weak spots super fast, and slams can also kill groups of miasmites both easily and safely. Funnily enough, the AoE of Latron's Incarnin form is also quite good for this phase, making it a fantastic all-rounder. If you don't have a good amp, rapid-fire weapons like the Burst On are solid choices for taking out the Mucus Spires, but amps seem to be the most effective play in my experience. Because the 2 phases are so different, I try to construct my loadout around 3 things: a weapon for Phase 1, a weapon for Phase 2, and a utility weapon. The Phase 1 weapon is almost always a precision weapon, the Phase 2 weapon is usually an AoE of some kind, and the utility weapon is therefore, well, utility. For example, let's take this lineup: Burst On Prime as our Phase 1 weapon, Lex Prime as our Phase 2 weapon, and Vastalok as our utility weapon. The Burst On's high weak point and crit damage makes it great for popping Phase 1 weak spots. The Lex Prime's energy waves can tear through several of the Phase 2 weak spots in one shot, and the Vastalok can be used for armor stripping, as well as spreading cold with melee Kareen. As another example, let's do Latron Prime, Tenet Cycron, and Sancti Magistar. Latron's high weak point damage is great for the first phase's weak spots, and on top of that, it can also armor strip using flensing spikes. The Sancti Magistar is an excellent slam weapon, and it can pop weak spots extremely easily in the second phase. Tenet Cycron is a very strong ad-clear weapon, and when equipped with magnetic and secondary fortifier, it's a great way to deal with all of the Eximus units that appear in both phases. Looking at Helminth abilities, the usual suspects are powerful as always, though with some unique considerations. You can't really go wrong with Roar, Nourish, or Zata's Whisper, but Nourish and Zata's do have some additional benefits. Nourish can be used to prime Viral without modding for it, meaning that you can focus on modding for damage types that match the boss's weaknesses. Weirdly enough, the first phase of the tank is also the only super boss that's vulnerable to the Void status effect. When used with an energy wave weapon like the Lex Prime, the projectile will get caught in the bubble, hitting the boss multiple times. This lets you chew up health bars without even needing an RPG, letting you all but skip the most dangerous part of the entire fight. Beyond the usual suspects, crowd control effects like Gloom and Terrify are great for handling miasmites, and defense reduction abilities like Pillage are good for softening up Eximus units. One last thing I want to mention real quick is that Holvania calendar buffs still apply in this boss fight, which can make it considerably easier if the boss is done later in the Holvanian year. If you're struggling to clear the boss in winter or spring, it might be worth waiting until summer or autumn to stack up as many buffs as you can. Several buffs, like Harden Up and Frequent Flyer benefits, are extremely good, and the fight is considerably easier if you have them. It's also worth noting that Targeted Medicine, which allows you to pick up health orbs by shooting them, lets you revive yourself if you shoot a health orb while downed. Because Eximus units drop health orbs, and there's a shit ton of them in this boss fight, this can be used to save yourself if you go down. Overall, a lot of the buffs in the calendar are really useful, which is why this video is out so late, because I had to wait for it to roll over to winter so they didn't mess up my footage. Now, one of the hardest parts of this fight is actually surviving it. Between the nullifying slime, huge attack hitboxes, and tank shot pulling off some phase level shit, staying alive can be a tall order. As such, I want to go over some survivability strategies that you can use to keep yourself safe. Do note that a decent amount of this stuff is going to be brought over from my other Superboss videos, so if you've already seen those, then you're welcome to jump ahead. If you're still here, I want to talk about the secret sauce that makes any frame borderline immortal: catalyzing shields. To explain why this mod is so broken, I first need to explain how shield gating actually works. So, put simply, shield gating works like this. When your shield breaks, there's a brief window where your health can't take damage. Shield quantity affects how long the invincibility is, and it varies quite wildly. The minimum shield gate duration is 0.33 seconds of invincibility, while the maximum is 2.5 seconds, which is achieved at 1,150 shields. Shield gating also takes into account your highest shield amount before your shields broke. To explain what I mean, say you have that maximum 2.5 second shield gate when your shields are full. Your shields don't have to immediately break from full for you to get that 2.5 second shield gate, but your shields do have to reach full at least once before they break. If your shields break and then start regenerating, but only make it halfway full before breaking again, then you'll only get 1.25 seconds of shield gating, as that's the highest value you reached before they broke again. You can tell if your full shield gate is ready by looking for this sort of energized effect on your shield bar, as it signals that your shield gate is fully charged. With that explained, let's look at catalyzing shields, which reduces shield capacity by 80% in exchange for a 1.33 second full shield gate duration. The idea behind this mod is pretty simple. Lower the player's shield quantity so it's easier for them to get their full shield gate. Here's what makes it broken though. The 1.33 second shield gate duration is always in effect, not just when your shields are full. This means that, if you gain even one shield point before they break again, you'll get the full 1.33 second duration. So catalyzing shields is great, especially in combination with mods like Brief Respite or the Augur set, as ability casts restore shields. While energy is fairly common in this fight on account of the Eximus spawns, the rampant nullification in the first phase can make this type of shield gating unreliable. As such, there's another method that I find even more effective: recharge delay reduction. By using both Fast Deflection and Vigilante Vigor, we can reduce our shield recharge delay to a measly 0.2 seconds, making our shields start recharging almost instantly. Shields don't naturally begin recharging until after shield gate invincibility is ended, but even so, that's an incredibly small window where you're vulnerable. The main weakness with this strategy is that magnetic procs do halt natural shield regeneration, which prolongs your vulnerability window, but once the effect wears off, your shields will recharge almost instantly. You can also take Arcane Nullifier to block the magnetic proc itself, which blocks the shield recharge penalty and keeps shields up almost 100% of the time. This combination of items, Arcane Nullifier, Catalyzing Shields, Fast Deflection, and Vigilante Vigor, makes you almost impossible to kill. The 0.2 second vulnerability window is so short that the only way you'll realistically die is if you're fast asleep or get exceptionally unlucky. There are still other survivability strategies I'm going to discuss, but know that this lineup is extremely powerful, even by itself. On the topic of shields, Arcane Aegis is also incredibly good in this fight, as it causes your shields to regenerate constantly while active. It isn't super reliable if you use Aegis exclusively, but in tandem with other forms of shield restoration, it can be a very valuable layer of redundancy. I also think it's important to bring up Rolling Guard, as its invincibility and status cleanse are super useful in this fight. You can use the invincibility window to stay alive while your shield gate is down, and the status cleanse can be used to save yourself from any gas procs that might be threatening to kill you. The main issue with Rolling Guard is that I roll to dodge things all the time, so I put it on cooldown accidentally, but if that's not an issue for you, then it's very worth using. The nice thing about all of these strategies is that they can be used together, and while it is very expensive to do so, they also make you extremely safe. Unsurprisingly, Vazarin is incredibly good for this fight. The invincibility from Protective Sling is borderline cheating, and the shield from Guardian Shell can block a lot of miscellaneous damage. Guardian Break is also an extremely useful buff, and it can help with shield gating while freeing up mod slots for other stats. Vazarin's main weakness is that, if nullified, you can't enter your operator, leaving you extremely vulnerable. On top of that, entering your operator can cause your Warframe to hold still long enough for slime to spawn on top of it, preventing transference back. Still, if you remain aware of the slime's location at all times, Vazarin is incredible. Adaptation is surprisingly effective in this fight, as the majority of the boss's attacks are entirely one damage type. It can be tricky to actually build up resistance to each damage type without dying, but for attacks like Phase 1's Machine Gun and Phase 2's Bottle Off, it can be a great way to minimize damage. With all of the Eximus units that appear in this fight, Secondary Fortifier and Arcane Circumvent are both phenomenal choices. Player Overguard breaks quite quickly against most boss attacks, and the nullifying effects of the slime do go through Overguard, but that's not a deal breaker. Overguard grants half a second of invincibility when breaking, so as long as you have any amount of Overguard, you'll be safe. Because so many Eximus units spawn, it's incredibly easy to refresh your Overguard in both phases of the fight, so abusing the gating window is very easy. On top of that, both Fortifier and Circumvent serve the secondary purpose of making the Eximus units themselves much easier to kill. This fight contains a ton of staggers and knockdowns. As such, mods like Handspring and, yes, Prime Sure-Footed, are great ways to minimize the pain of these attacks. This is also another point in Overguard's favor, as its status immunity prevents knockdowns and staggers, but it's so easily broken that it's not as reliable. Now, you remember how I said that Scaldra units in the lead up to the boss fight can be used to activate conditionals? Well, you can also use them to stack up Arcane Escapist, which grants up to 3 free deaths throughout this fight. On top of that, the Eximus units that spawn throughout the fight can be used for mercy kills, making stacks easy to recover. I know this arcane is pretty inaccessible on account of it being a temporal Archimedia arcane, but if you have it, then it's surprisingly strong. Side note, this strat also works against Giannis 4, but I completely forgot this arcane existed, so I didn't mention it in that video. Big thank you to the comments for reminding me that this item is even in the game. Now that we've covered all of the mechanics and strategy, what do you actually get for conquering the H-09 Apex tank? Well, on your first completion, you'll earn yourself the best Sumdali in the entire game, the H-09 tank turret. This thing is so goofy, especially when you strap it on something like the Parallax. I don't personally use it, but this shit is so good that it's a strong incentive to beat the boss all by itself. In addition to the Sumdali, the Apex tank has 6 accolade glyphs, which are awarded for defeating the boss solo with the following frames: Excalibur, Mag, Volt, Trinity, Nyx, and Cyto9. Each of these glyphs depicts not its corresponding frame, but each frame's hex counterpart, which is a cool touch. Upon collecting all 6 of these glyphs, the player will receive a unique Honoria, the Mechanic. I don't think it sounds nearly as badass as the other Superboss titles, but it's so hard to get that it's still worth rocking. If you're struggling to get any of these accolades for yourself, I'll leave a playlist of commentated accolade runs in the description. There, I'll show my builds, talk about my thought process, and show a full run of the boss with each frame. Do note that I already have the glyphs, so you won't see them actually drop, just to make sure you aren't confused. Alright, that's all I wanted to talk about in this video. The Apex tank is, like many other Superbosses, an exercise in multitasking. With the attacks being so hard to understand, and death being so merciless and swift, I see a lot of players express a lot of frustration with this fight. I actually agree that this fight is the most frustrating of all the Superbosses, but if you build your weapons right and know what to look out for, it becomes much more manageable. Let me know in the comments if this guide helped you out, and please do reply to the pinned comment with any strategies you use to clear the boss fight. I tried to be as comprehensive as I could, but I know that these guides are skewed towards how I play the game, so I want people to share their methods for those who might find them helpful. With all that said, feel free to leave a like if you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more slop every week-ish, and dislike to drop an atomic bomb directly on my neighborhood. I also want to give a huge thanks to you for watching this video, and an even bigger thanks to my channel members whose names you've been seeing on screen. This channel wouldn't continue to exist without their support, so seriously, thank you. With all that said, thank you again for watching, and I'll see you all next time when I down a 6-pack and get behind the wheel of the Effervon tank.